Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Aaron Dorfman, founder of A More Perfect Union. As America approaches its 250th anniversary, many of us are wrestling with a surprisingly personal question. How should we feel about America right now? For some people, July 4th feels like a straightforward celebration. For much of my life, Independence Day primarily evoked memories of the 4th of July parade in my hometown of Superior, Wisconsin, and fireworks at the county fairground. For the last 18 years, it's held an entirely different valence. We celebrate our eldest daughter's birthday every year on the 4th of July. For a long time, we managed to persuade her that the fireworks were for her. For many Americans, though, Independence Day feels more complicated. Many Americans are proud of our country's ideals and grateful for the freedoms they've experienced here, while also feeling concerned about polarization, democratic norms, and the future of our civic life. For American Jews, that tension may feel especially familiar. Jewish tradition has long wrestled with how to love imperfect communities, how to remain committed without becoming complacent, and how to hold gratitude and responsibility at the same time. Today's conversation explores those questions through the lens of American Jewish civics, an emerging field that asks what Jewish wisdom, experience, and values can contribute to American civic life. I'm delighted to be joined by two outstanding educators and thinkers who helped shape that conversation and continue to shape that conversation. First, Rabbi Michael Holzman is the spiritual leader of Northern Virginia Hebrew Congregation and the creator of the American Scripture Project, which helps faith communities explore American identity through the practice of shared text study. For nearly a decade, Michael has worked at the intersection of faith and democracy, and he's also the founder of Faith 250, a multi-faith initiative helping Americans commemorate our nation's 250th anniversary. Danielle Kranjec is Assistant Vice President for Jewish Education at Hillel International, where she helps shape the educational experiences of Jewish students across North America. A nationally recognized educator, Danielle previously served as Director of Campus Initiatives at the Shalom Hartman Institute of North America and has spent her career helping people deepen their Jewish identities, relationships, and sense of responsibility to the communities around them. Michael and Danielle were both participants in the American Jewish Civics Seminar, a first of its kind effort convened by A More Perfect Union and the Shalom Hartman Institute to explore what American Jewish civics can mean in this moment and for the future. Thank you both for being here. Let's begin with the question that may be on many people's minds as we approach July 4th this year. And Danielle, I'll start with you. How are you feeling about Independence Day in 2026?
So it's interesting, counter to the narrative that I'm hearing around me. I'm actually feeling so grateful and so excited about America's 250th anniversary. Um, some people know I spent a significant amount of time in Western Europe this past fall, and I think it's, only when we're outside of America that we realize our Americanness and the sense of homecoming and ability to show up as my full self in America has never been more precious to me. And I love America. I love the potential for what it can be. And even in the midst of everything we're facing, I think I'm coming into this 250th anniversary with a new sense of commitment and excitement and just potential for what we and our neighbors from the most local to the national level can really be building.
Um, Daniel, I love that. I love that observation that you can only really appreciate a thing for like a little bit from the outside. Can you like share like one thing? Like what was one thing that you like spending time in Western Europe? I think you were in Spain, right?
I was in
So, like
Spain.
okay, so for like
Yeah.
what was something that crystallized for you?
I mean, the cultural diversity and the broad expanse of who Americans are and how we interact with each other is so precious to me. And living in a very homogenous kind of monocultural situation, and then coming back to the diversity of Pittsburgh, to the diversity of America, and the diversity of my neighborhood, Squirrel Hill, where I live, just feels so precious and so exciting, that there's not an expectation that we're all the same. And I think the challenge to figure out how to share values when we're not the same, feels both urgent and really like the source of a lot of potential for good.
Hmm, love that. Great, thank you. Michael, how about you? How you feeling about the 4th of July?
I'm feeling overwhelmed and exhausted and overjoyed about the 4th of July. Overjoyed because of the level of interest that we've seen in the faith community across the country and the hunger people have for meaningful and inspiring and shared celebrations of this moment. I think many people feel exactly the way I felt a year ago when we started working on Faith 250. Right now, people are looking at the way in which partisanship has just taken over what should be a shared celebration, and in their dismay, they're looking for alternatives. And fortunately, we have in neighborhoods all across the country faith institutions that are there ready to stand up and offer a place to gather and to make sense of this moment in time. Personally, I'm looking at this moment and I am I am feeling a combination. I'm not quite as positive as Danielle in the sense that I get what Danielle is saying, and I have had that wonderful experience of going through customs and immigration at the airport, and the guy is, or the woman's like there, and it just feels like I'm coming home. I have many times felt that way. But what I'm feeling right now is like I am in this, we are in this historical moment in the cycle of American what's the right terminology? There's this cycle of American paradox, American tension with our ideals and the reality of power that has always kind of played out on this continent. And there are moments at the high point of that cycle where it feels like, it seems like history is moving in the direction of progress. The arc is bending towards justice. More and more people are being included in the franchise. More and more people are being included in the rights that are articulated in the Declaration. And then there are moments when the wave passes and we're at the trough and it feels like we're going back towards the hegemony of white power, Jacksonian democracy, redemption following Reconstruction, and it just feels like, oh, right, now we're back at that part of the cycle. And I just thought we were at a different part of the cycle a few years ago. And I think many of us in the Jewish community grew up with an assumption that was the only part of the cycle. And no, we're becoming familiar as Jews with the other part of the cycle. And that's where I feel more a sense of determination to kind of force the wave pattern back to where I want it to be.
Mm. I love that the sense of the paradox of it, right? Like I feel like one of the one of the dominant tropes of the conversation about civics education in America over the last decade has been this like like the polar tension between the 1619 project with its heavy emphasis on critiquing the American experiment and the 1776 project with its like intense focus on patriotism and some would say whitewashing of the American experiment. I'm curious about how each of you think about how possible it is to simultaneously celebrate and critique, and whether there's anything in Jewish tradition that can help us hold those two truths at the same time. Michael, I'll go to you first on this one.
Well, I am a rabbi, so my answer is probably not going to be surprising. We dance with the Torah
Softball,
on
softball.
we dance with the Torah on Simchat Torah and have incredible joy, and then we sit and we argue incessantly about what it means. And I feel like 1619, 1776, 1865, 1963. These are all moments of revelation, and there's others. These are moments of revelation, moments of American Sinai. And just like at Sinai, God did not speak in one language for everyone to hear. God spoke in different ways for people to hear differently and then argue about what they heard. And I feel like, American revelation has been this desire for a continent-wide, millions of people to figure out how you create a civilization dedicated to equality and human dignity, which no one's ever done in human history, right? So how do you create a whole civilization of this size and this diversity? It really is a project approaching cosmic, transcendent, you know, God level complexity, and so I just see Torah as the metaphor for how we celebrate something and argue about it.
Like the multivocality of our tradition paralleled by what Danielle was talking about, like the diversity of America. Yep. Great. Danielle, what about you?
Obviously, I love everything that my friend and teacher, Rabbi Michael Holtzman, just shared. But I have to say, I'm like a very anxious person. And when the narrative gets grand on that level, I feel like I need to take it back down into something that I can wrap my arms around and something that I can take action towards. So
Mm.
for me, like the celebration and like the conflict and the anxiety, like have to come back to something in my own hands. And so I've been thinking a lot about Esther. I mean, this is one of the texts, one of the core texts that we teach in Hillel in our work on civics. But I think about Mordecai saying to Esther, exactly this. Umi yodea im le'et kazot higat lemalchut. Like, what if it's for just this moment that you've come into whatever power you've come into? And so I think that's the balance for me. Between like the critique and the celebration of like, what do I actually have power to impact? Like, if I'm going to critique something, I need to actually do something about it.
Mhm.
And I think that sort of helps me like dial the anxiety down because then I can make a to-do list. Then I can make a strategy about which conversations I'm going to step into, what actions I'm going to take, what I'm going to get involved with. And for me, that has to be part of it. It can't be one or the other, and it has to be sort of balanced with action.
Love that too.
I just have to
Michael.
jump in with what
Yeah, yeah.
Danielle said because I just think that this idea of agency and that agency is one of the ways one of the antidotes to anxiety, I think is so wise. It reminds me of, the months after October 7th when Israelis on the ground who were dealing with much more difficult circumstances had less anxiety than American Jews who were walking around without something to do, right? You couldn't, without having it. And I feel like when we engage at the local neighborhood, Hillel campus, congregational level, we find more agency than when we talk about these things writ large. And I just gotta say it. The reason I'm joining this conversation from New York, from my mother's apartment, is because I'm here for the weekend at the wedding of a friend I made at the Wash U Hillel. Go Bears, okay? And the wedding was filled with Wash U Hillel alumni, okay, under the era of Jim Diamond, Love HaShalom, and so many of them I had served as board members of their synagogues and had taken the agency that they learned on campus as Jewish leaders, and they had become leaders in their local communities in the Jewish world, in their congregations all over the place, right? Now, I wish more of them had good experiences as board members of their synagogues. Because that does not bode well for democracy if we can't figure out how to do democracy in our Hillels and in our synagogues. But it does give me hope that this like incredible American spirit of agency that like we all learn as children when we argue over the rules on the playground, right? I mean, we grow up knowing that the rules are in our hands and then we all have to follow them. Like rule of law applies to all of us and we all can help shape the rules and then we have to follow them, right? This is like playground stuff. And it's part of the American culture. And I feel like that to me is one of the greatest like lessons about how we deal with this anxiety this moment.
I'm super curious about, like, I feel like there are a couple of threads happening here, and I wanna like pull them apart. One is Danielle, your invocation of Esther and the lessons that Jewish tradition has for us as Jews. Right. I'm also curious about contributions that our tradition can offer to American civic discourse. And I want to be like careful in this because I know that there are a lot of people who like to, retell the American story as a story of the reification of Jewish whatever, that like this is it's ultimately a Judeo-Christian or Jewish like project, and I don't have that kind of hubris. But I'm curious about um, when you look at our tradition, our Jewish tradition, and um, the wisdom or the offerings it can have that might be material in this particular moment of 2026, the semi-quincentennial year, are there things that you feel like, oh, we should be bringing this to the table? Like that's something that we can contribute that really will matter. Either of you.
I mean, I love the work that our group did together in trying to find those threads and what those values might be. And I go back to our work often, and think about it and share it in various ways in various spheres of my influence, of my malchut, if you will, of the places where I might have power or influence. And the one that I think is maybe the most countercultural for me right now, the value or piece of our tradition is this notion of mipnei darkei shalom, like in order for the ways of peace and understanding. Because I think part of what that is asking of us, or what that part of our tradition is guiding us towards, is a kind of mutuality and compromise. And I feel like that is very unpopular right now. Like in a landscape of polarization, it is much easier to choose from column A or column B and dig into what you very much know to be right, and to actually show up in community and show up with those people that are different than you, and figure out where the common ground is and what you're willing to compromise on in order to be in community or coalition. To me, that feels like the biggest job we have right now. Potentially the hardest and potentially the least popular, even to the extent that people get criticized for
Mhm.
being, too willing to compromise. Whereas, we might lift that up as an essential value, to keep our democracy strong, to keep our country strong.
Mhm. Great. Michael, other thoughts?
I mean, there's just so many things I think about when you ask this question. I mean, first and foremost, I think just Jews have embodied a test case for American religious freedom since the founding,
Mm.
and I think that, I recently heard Rabbi Mark Katz use that language of being the test case, and then he listed off other test cases. Right, there have been other test cases, and since we started this, being the test case. The LDS Church has been the test case. Yeah, African Americans have obviously been the test case. The Muslim community, more recently, has been the test case for religious freedom and for American democracy. So I do think, the role of being a minority group, um, in the larger system of American democracy and the larger culture of American democracy, I think has been evolving since the beginning. And now, since we're getting to, the last generation, where a demographic shift has really come to the point where it looks like we may be coming in the next 50 years to a place where the white community, the white Christian community, is no longer the majority community by default. It just means that everyone has to learn new psychological skills, and a lot of those psychological skills are things like humor, things like creative expression, which if you look at Americana, so much of what makes America America has always come from the margins. It's come from Appalachia, what poor white people. It's come from the African American community in so many different ways. It's come from the Jewish community. If you want to see really great comedians today, no offense to my fellow Ashkenazi Jews, but you need to see Pakistani comedians. They're hilarious. I mean, like, it's really a thing, and so I feel like there is this psychological shift that Jews have brought to America for the last few generations, and all those great songs written by Jews in the 1920s and 30s, right? I mean, I think that comes out of this conversation that we've been having with America, as who we are in our culture. So I'm taking, I guess, a little more of an agadic approach instead of like the halacha of mipnei darkei shalom, and there's like so many other halachot that we talked about in the American Jewish Civic Seminar that I think are really helpful frameworks, and I rely on them all the time. I also think there's like a certain ethic of being Jewish in America that has been really formative for the country and continues to be, especially now given what's been happening in Israel and Palestine, and the reaction to all the events over there. I think that that has once again put the Jewish community at the center of discourse around what American values mean. So
Um, I so appreciate that each of you drew on not just a different source, but a different dimension of the American Jewish experience, right? We American Jews are Jews, and we share a canon of text and tradition with all Jews everywhere all the time. And we are the products of a very particular and distinctive history, right? An American Jewish history, the first political community in which we were recognized as entirely equal citizens from the beginning of the project. And that distinctive history is something that is particular to American Jews. That historical experience has shaped us in the same way that our textual tradition has shaped us. And I think both of those are sources of what we have become, what we are. I want to like probe a different dimension of that. Um, uh, I think one of the great qualities of Judaism is its perennial aspirational quality, right? Like we engage in a tshuva process all the time, ideally, but like on the regular in order to interrogate ourselves and like improve ourselves, recognizing that the project of self-improvement is ongoing. We talk about Bashana Haba Yerushalayim, right, next year in Jerusalem, even when we're in Jerusalem, because we're always trying to get to the promised land. Our archetypal metaphor as a people is like the journey en route to the thing we want to get to, but like never quite, it's asymptotic, like we're never quite there. And I think that has a lot of a lot of quality that may have application to the American experiment. I'm curious, like, if that resonates for you, how so, how not? Like, how do those two things map onto each other? Again, without forcing the issue. Michael, I'll go to you first.
yeah, but I'll jump in. I'll say that I mean, there's other big parts of Jewish aspirationalism that you left out, like messianic thinking, and I think that
Sure.
Jews. Um, I don't know if we're the only culture that introduced messianic thinking to the world, but I do know it certainly has played a big role in world history, Jewish messianic thinking, and there are certainly people who want to exit. I mean, Michael Walzer describes this in Exodus and Revolution, how people want to exit the hard work and the exhausting work of politics in favor of a messianic solution so that we just get to a utopia. And I think on the far, far left and the far, far right, I think there are people who really want that. And that's dangerous stuff, right? So I think that Jewish aspirationalism, it's so interesting the examples you brought up, right? Like Bashana Haba'ah, well, that comes at the end of a Seder, right? And the Seder is an experience of people arguing over what exactly this whole thing means and what does it mean to us, not to you, right? And all these messages that the Seder creates. It creates a structure for the conversation. We break bread together. We ask a lot of questions. We include multiple generations. We have lots of aesthetics and rituals that it's not just an intellectual conversation. There's all kinds of things we do to contain the conversation so that it doesn't spin out of control and people start screaming at each other. And I think that that's a real gift, that ability to contain conversation in healthy ways so that people can, really dig deep and sometimes rebuke each other, but do so with love, right? Like that's a certain art. And I think, the Jewish community brings that, there have been Seders created for Passover Seders created for different political moments. And then there have been like other American holiday Seders. We talked about this in the seminar, how there was a Thanksgiving Seder. I think it was Kaplan. Was it Kaplan that created the Thanksgiving Seder? Right. So I think that there are other ways that Jews do aspiration that are really helpful to the American project.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate your acknowledging that aspirationalism can be super reductive and like kind of rigid, and that maybe the pull is between the being in the hard work and the process, and Danielle, your point about compromise, which is hard and maybe unpopular, and particularly in a moment of intense polarization. So it's not the only story. Danielle, thoughts about this, like application of this to the American conversation?
If there's any situation in America that is sort of a nexus of aspiration, I think it's the college years. Both the dream of every family that dreams it to send their children to college, that they will accomplish more, be smarter, achieve greater wealth, greater prosperity, and that campus experience sort of being at the heart of that kind of personal, familial, and even national aspiration, I think is there's a reason why people are obsessed with what's happening on campus. There's a reason why people are obsessed with the college years. And I think a lot about the aspects of ritual and how we inculcate that for a positive sort of life pattern for Jewish students, particularly, obviously, in the context of Hillel. But also, I think a lot about the kinds of stories that we tell and the kinds of aspirations that we set. Because again, I think there are certain aspects of the ways Jews frame this aspirational vision that are universal or capacious enough for a wide variety of aspirations. But I think we also have a lot of power to shape the kinds of aspirations that we're setting within our community. And, tying Jewish individual well-being with the health and status of our broader communities, our counties, our states, our nations, et cetera, like I think is an important opportunity. And I think aspirationally, like we haven't accomplished it yet, but I think we can get there. And I think it's an important part of our work that we can't ignore.
Um, Yeah, so I'm gonna like I want to go deeper on that, Danielle, for a minute in terms of the work that you do at Hillel, this work of education and formation of young people. I'll make it very personal for a minute and say I'm about to, my 4th of July kid graduated yesterday and is off to hopefully spend a lot of time in Hillel buildings and on college campus doing all the amazing things that American colleges at their best do. So when you think about the work of Hillel in terms of helping to shape citizens, right? Shape American citizens, American Jewish citizens who are capable of both the critique and the commitment, the love and the challenge that we were talking about earlier. Like talk about that work. How does that play out?
I mean, I think all three of us have children on campus or about to be on campus at this point. So, we have our own kind of personal relationship to this work too. My own child was part of the COVID B mitzvah generation. So, there's so much to say about this. Commitment, I think the first step is really just about helping young people understand the value in showing up and being in community. Critique is so easy. Like, critique is the aesthetic of the moment. Like, critique on social media, a kind of shallow critique is also a sort of way of being in a very shallow type of community and a very shallow type of coalition building. To show the flip of that, of like how showing up and actually, putting yourself on the line in terms of getting to know someone and being vulnerable and trying to understand another human being, much less like a whole community of other human beings, and the kind of depth of critique that would lead a person to, like, I think that's a big part of the path. It's really, I mean, it's not easy to express the value of showing up when our young people at a very key point in their development, we're told actually the best thing that you can do to keep people healthy is not show up,
Mm,
because
wow.
it set a very particular pattern of behavior, and of a value statement. So right now, I think, before we could even talk about the kind of broader civic engagement work that Hillel's involved with or trying to shape on campus, even just getting students and young people to understand what it means to show up for each other on a very basic relational level, is the first most important step. And that's really, where we're building right now, and then thinking about all the rest of it as a particular progression. Because to Michael's point, I can't tell you the times in my work on campus. I worked for many years on campus at the University of Pittsburgh and Carnegie Mellon at a multi-campus Hillel here in Pittsburgh. I would see these young people, these student leaders, and I would literally imagine them on the board of their synagogue, in some 20 something years down the line, and imagining what kind of leadership they were going to take in their community in these very real, tangible ways. Um, so even just building those relationships and helping young people see that path and help give them the skills to go on that path is some of the most crucial and important work that we're doing at Hillel right now.
Love it. All right. Well, so like my kid's off to a good spot if that's the project.
I just want to say about this showing up thing. I mean, I do think that it's going to become more and more critical. Everything Danielle just said, as we get into the AI age, right? And all of the bad habits of connecting with people only through screens, which we're doing right now. Okay, legitimately. Let's acknowledge, like, wow, we're so lucky. And there's this risk that we think we're getting enough human interaction and we're not. And Hillel, by providing a building, usually, not always, or at least by being a convener of bodies in
Yeah.
real three-dimensional space, I think that's really important civic work. Really important civic work. It's why we have institutions. It's why Faith 250 is based on congregations, because a lot of people have asked, can we do Faith 250 without a congregation? Can we just do it as individuals? And our answer has been no, right? You need a convening institution with deep roots in the community that's going to stick around for generations beyond you, which Hillel, like, that's the best part about college is like everyone cycles in, cycles out. And some institutions have been here before you guys and will be here after you. And the same thing is true for the rest of society, right? And I think that having those convening places enables us to bear the psychic tension that comes along with rebuke. I mean, I think when you do critique, just like Danielle said, when you do critique, that means you're rebuking. What does Torah tell us? When you rebuke, you take the risk that you're going to sin, right? And so I think that we need to have those institutions to hold us when we do so.
Mm. That 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 notion that the institution will be there and that you get to be in it for a little while and then it transcends you, right? Like that's the experience of being a Jew, of being an American, being affiliated with any institution that is transcendent. It totally reminds me of that amazing um, uh, when Robin Williams in Dead Poets Society quotes the Whitman poet, the Whitman poem, right? Like that the powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse.
Mhm.
Right, like that's the thing. Like that's the I love that insight. Okay, Michael, a little I want to do a little touch a little more deeply on Faith 250. And the project is about inviting people to rediscover a shared American story, right? Shared American story is a really tough proposition right now. Right? Like so we feel like we share so little. So I'm curious about how that happens. What that means at a time when Americans are not only disagreeing with each other about this policy or that policy, but about the fundamentals of what the American story is, what the American story means, who belongs inside the American story, who doesn't. How are you addressing that?
So I will say that did you read the Benjamin Applebaum piece in the Atlantic about the word patriotism and what happens when he went to a convening of thought leaders all about like how do we bridge divides, and they were supposed to come up with words that would be unifying, and he put out patriotism and the whole room got quiet. I mean, like, yeah, it's that has been one of the big learnings of this year. So Faith 250 is bringing together these clergy and then their congregations to study American documents together. So we do have a shared American story in the sense that we do have these things that are on parchment and paper and stone and on plaques on the Statue of Liberty. Like we all agree it's there. Now we have to deal with it, right? So when Thomas Jefferson refers to Native Americans using a word that undermines the very moral aspirations that he previously articulated earlier in the Declaration of Independence, right? I mean, that those words are our shared story, whether you like it or not. Okay, you can't just cover your eyes and stick your head in the sand and pretend it's not there. And so that gives us a starting place, right? Just like Torah gives us a starting place. Now, what happens next is what Pirkei Avot teaches. Two people sit together over a piece of text, and God's presence appears between them. And that's a totally different experience than what's on the page. And it's connected to what's on the page, but certainly what we've discovered is is this tendency for people to be really scared entering the room because exactly what you said, people don't feel like we have a shared American story. People anticipate they're going to be mocked or they're going to be isolated or alienated, and they're really kind of afraid to speak up. And then when they have this moment when the Shekhinah appears between myself and a neighbor, a stranger, as we're trying to decipher words that our national story holds dear, right? That is a really transformative moment. And it does take a great deal of courage for the individual participant to show up. It takes even more courage for the clergy and the lay leaders of those congregations to say, we're going to do this thing, right? And sadly, I will say that many of our right-leaning local institutions are opting out. I don't think they're opting out of any kind of malice. I think they're opting out because they just avoid multi-faith activities in general. Fortunately, the LDS Church has kind of stepped up in a humongous way. And so our Faith 250 gatherings have had real viewpoint diversity offered by the LDS Church. I wish there were more evangelical Christians in the room and more conservative Catholics in the room, okay, because I think that would be even more interesting. But we'll take what we have. And watching people interact across these lines of viewpoint diversity, political difference, and to do so in a context of caring and compassion and dignity. People have the written comments have been just like give you chills. People saying, I never speak up at these things, and then watching my neighbor say this thing I disagreed with, but in such a way, blah, blah, blah. And people are finding their voices, and that to me is pretty amazing. But it does take a great deal of leadership, courage to say we're gonna do this, because that exact thing you said is really a big anxiety for a lot of people.
Yeah. As Donald Rumsfeld once said, you go to the Beit Midrash with the army you have. Uh, yeah, yeah,
That's
got to
exactly
start.
what that's exactly what he said. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
exactly what he said. That's exactly what he said. All right. Well, I feel like I wanted to ask both of you about where you see reasons for hope, but I feel like you've both talked about it, right? You've talked about people coming together and getting uncomfortable about text. You've talked about people encountering diversity and difference in on college campuses where they're like in that process of formation. I think those things give me a lot of hope. So I want to start. I want to go back to where we started. Um, in 10 days or so from when we're recording this conversation, it's the morning of the 4th of July, 2026, Shabbat morning. I'm sitting in shul, or I'm at my kid's baseball game, or I'm headed to the beach or a barbecue, and I'm feeling some messy mix of gratitude and pride in America, and also like some real existential concern about America's present and America's future. And I'm not sure how to hold those feelings together simultaneously. So, what do you want me to remember? Michael, I'll start with you, and then Danielle will give you a last word.
I want to go back to something you said earlier, which is you talked about tshuva. And I think that, you know, tshuva happens all the time in Judaism, but our great cathedral of tshuva is Yom Kippur. And the liturgy of that day teaches us so much about how a community aspires for a better world. Like we talk about our sins in the first person plural because even if we didn't individually do it, we take responsibility as a community. And I think that gives me incredible strength to think about America because there's so much to celebrate about America and like we can do tshuva as America and not be ashamed and not be feeling guilty, but be feeling strong and because we're doing it together. And so I feel like, that to me is where I want to lean in on this July 4th. I'm thinking about simultaneously, like all the things we're grateful for about all the ideas and all the things that have happened and all the things that America has built for the world and for humanity simultaneously, I am really deeply pained. I mean, at what's happening right now. I'm deep. I mean, I live outside DC, and it's just embarrassing. I mean, what's being done to our city is just embarrassing. It's like a parade of incompetence. And so, I mean, even like all the ridiculousness that the president is trying to do to all the different buildings, which is all backfiring in so many different ways. I mean, the self-aggrandizement is like offensive enough, but the incompetence repentance on top of the self-aggrandizement is like there's a tendency to want to just like turn into Schadenfreude and be like, oh, look at how badly they're doing it. And at the same time, it just pains me, as a citizen. And so I would love a beautiful reflecting pool. Who wouldn't want a beautiful reflecting pool, right? But you got to do things
Going,
the right way,
going
you
back
know,
to Chuva, right? Like
right?
a
Exactly.
metaphor for national reflection. How great would that be?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exact. Thank you. Thank you for completing my thought better than I could. Right. So I just think that on this July 4th, I'm just gonna be thinking about like the Maimonidean lesson of tshuva is like when you're back in the same exact situation again in the future, don't do the same thing. That's a demonstration that you've made tshuva, right? What can America do so that we learn from this moment and don't get back here again and the cycles that keep happening to us?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Danielle.
I mean, it makes sense that on in this conversation with two of my teachers that I would be thinking in a very similar way. I think one of the things that the Faith 250 project did for me was help me think beyond like the Jewish textual tradition and get back to some of the issues earlier in our conversation about what are the stories that we are telling, what are our source texts, and what texts from America can we draw on to give us strength. And so Aaron, I think I shared this with you before, but I put together sort of my own little mini canon of texts for America's 250th that I've been drawing on when I need those personal moments of strength. And I think the words of Representative John Lewis, which are very resonant with Jewish wisdom, have been something that guide me that I'm really holding on to in the 250th because it isn't just about the cheshbon nefesh part of tshuva, the taking account of our souls and where we're at part of tshuva, but it's the action part. So I've just like I've been reading a lot of his work, a lot of his published work over the past year. But this quote really stuck with me. Ours is not the struggle of one day, 1 week, or 1 year. Ours is not the struggle of one appointment or presidential term. Ours is the struggle of a lifetime, or maybe even many lifetimes. And each of us in every generation must do our part. So I
Mm,
think that that sort of push to action of the action aspect of tshuva and what is my part? How am I doing my part? Is really what's sticking with me. And I truly hope that every American can feel that this July 4th, wherever they are, that they are a part and that they have a part and something that they can do.
mm. That the powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse. Ah, brilliant,
Amen.
brilliant.
Amen.
Um, well, thank you both so much. Always a gift to get to learn with and from the two of you. And maybe that we'll close with that as sort of the invitation to America's semi-quincentennial, a word I just will never get tired of saying, the 250th anniversary of our nation's founding. Not blind celebration, not cynicism, but like a deeper kind of Yoni Applebaum's patriotism, right? One rooted in gratitude for what we have inherited, honesty about what's unfinished, and a really deep sense of John Lewisian responsibility for what comes next. Thank you so much for joining us. Wishing you a happy 4th of July, happy Independence Day, and really, really grateful for this time.